Welcome to Cold Case Detectives Too Close to Home, the series where we select 5 patrons at random and examine cases related to their hometowns. If you'd like to see your hometown featured, you can support the channel on Patreon by following the link below. And now let's dive in with 5 cases from your hometowns, the mysteries that strike too close to home. Alexis Scott. Our first case this month comes from our patron Carissa, who chose the city of Peoria in Illinois, USA. Alexis Camry Scott was just 20 years old when she vanished from a house party in 2017. She was last seen at the event, which was taking place on the 100 block of Richmond Avenue in Peoria, Illinois, between the hours of 4 and 6 a.m. on September 22, 2017. The final confirmed sighting of the mother of one was when she was dropped off at the party via taxi. The cab driver later told investigators that a man approached the cab and greeted Alexis before paying her fare. It is believed that she arrived at the party around 5 a.m. and left shortly afterwards, with one witness claiming Alexis left the party on foot at 5:30, although this information has not been confirmed. Her mobile phone was last used at 5:08 a.m. On September 27th, a missing persons report was filed by Alexis's mother, who noted that her daughter often came back from nights out at around sunrise, but was known to sometimes stay out of touch for a few days at a time. Her mother had grown particularly concerned, however, when she discovered that Alexis hadn't been active on social media. Detectives interviewed neighbors where the party had taken place, searched local empty houses, and combed through the area to look for clues as to the 20-year-old's whereabouts, but they came away from these searches empty-handed, with no new information. There was no evidence found that could help detectives determine where Alexis was, even after they obtained a search warrant for the home where the party had taken place on the night of the 22nd. Notably, it had been theorized that Alexis's uncharacteristic disappearance is linked to an incident in which she was sex trafficked shortly before she went missing. According to her family, the mother of one traveled to Las Vegas, Nevada, just weeks before she disappeared. She intended on making some extra money by picking up work as an exotic dancer, but became a victim of sex trafficking and was ultimately taken to Sacramento, California. The details of Alexis's experience and subsequent escape are unclear, but at some point, she was able to escape the people who had taken her and was found wandering the streets, unclothed, by a woman who helped her contact her family. Alexis was able to return to Peoria and wanted to simply get on with her life and have things be as normal as possible. It has been said by her family, however, that she feared the people who had taken her would retaliate. Reportedly, since her disappearance, Alexis's family have discovered that a man who she had gone to Las Vegas with knew the owner of the property where the party took place. They are fearful that she may have been trafficked again. The homeowner, for their part, has stated that they didn't know Alexis very well. They have been cooperating with the investigation. Alexis Scott was 20 when she vanished from Peoria, Illinois, having last been seen in the 100 block of Richmond Avenue between 4 and 6 a.m. on September 22, 2017. She has not been seen or heard from since and left behind her 2-year-old son. In 2021, a portrait artist based in Chicago named Damon Reed painted an image of Alexis along with other missing women in an effort to highlight their cases throughout the state. Alexis is described as an African-American woman with brown hair and brown eyes. She is 5'1" and weighed around 140 pounds when she was last seen. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing a black zip-up Victoria's Secret hoodie with pink designs on it, light blue jeans, and a white cropped top. She has pierced ears, a pierced nose, and a pierced lower lip, although this may be a scar, as she reportedly removed the piercing shortly before going missing. She also has orthodontic braces, which she removed herself, but the brackets are still on her lower teeth. Her nickname is Lex, and she has stretch marks on her abdomen from when she was pregnant with her son. Alexis also has an array of tattoos, including leopard spots on the right side of her collarbone, alongside the name Tevin Jr. in cursive writing, the name Lily in cursive on the left side of her collarbone, and the name Trevon in cursive on her right wrist. Finally, she has the word royalty in cursive on the inside of her left arm. If Alexis is still alive, she will be 25 years old. If you have any information about her disappearance, you can contact the Peoria Police Department at 309-673-4521. Or, alternatively, you can call Crime Stoppers at 309-673-9000. Kayla Hunter and Christian Justice. Our second case this month comes from an anonymous patron who chose the location of Detroit, Michigan, USA. 6-year-old Kayla Hunter, her 8-month-old half-brother Christian Justice, and their mother, Alicia Fox, were last seen on May 24, 2014 in Detroit, Michigan. Prior to their disappearance, they'd been living with Christian's father and Alicia's husband of 4 months, Aaron Justice, in the 18,000 block of Ardmore Street, but had moved out shortly before they vanished. On June 3rd, over a week after the three were last seen alive, Kayla's father received a text message from Alicia. It is unknown what the message said, but authorities don't believe that the mother of two had sent it. The trio were reported missing on June 6th, after Kayla missed her kindergarten graduation. Family members had gone to the Ardmore Street residence looking for the family, but found it empty, with no car in the driveway. They noted that, through an open window, they could see that Alicia's possessions were gone, and all that remained was a bottle of bleach in the kitchen. Once inside the property, with the aid of the police, they discovered that all the furniture was gone, and the home had been cleaned from top to bottom. Alicia's belongings were later found in a church donation bin, not far from the residence. 3 days later, on June 9th, Alicia's remains were found in the basement of an abandoned house on Penridge Street, Detroit. Her body was badly decomposed and had been wrapped in a blanket, while her post-mortem confirmed she had been shot twice in the head. Family members recalled that something black, possibly a bin bag, had been placed over Alicia's head, and it appeared as if someone had attempted to remove her legs. Notably, the vacant property was located just 3 doors down from where Aaron Justice's cousin lived. The children, however, were not found in the basement, and there was no trace of them at the scene. 2 days passed before Justice was arrested in Atlanta, Georgia. He was charged with first-degree murder in Alicia's case. Authorities discovered that he had rented a U-Haul trailer following the murder and driven it 300 miles over the course of 3 days, May 27th to May 29th, remaining in Detroit the entire time. He then sold Alicia's Chevrolet Impala to a junkyard in Taylor, Michigan, but it had already been stripped down by the time investigators found it. After all of this, Justice booked a flight to Atlanta and was able to board it while nobody was any the wiser. This was not Justice's first run-in with the police. He had a criminal record for drugs and weapons offenses and a lengthy history of violence towards women. On June 2nd, the day before Kayla's father received a text allegedly from his daughter, Justice appeared in court and pleaded guilty to several traffic violations. Justice was also not the only man investigators knew to be involved. Timothy Bernard Jones was charged with evidence tampering, concealing a death, and being an accessory to murder after the fact. The two men were childhood friends, and authorities believed that Jones helped Justice hide the body. Jones later told investigators that Alicia's body had originally been placed in a crawl space at Justice's home, and when Jones helped to move it, the two children were still alive. Detectives believed that Justice killed Alicia inside their Ardmore Street home sometime between May 25th and May 27th, as they found a bullet hole lodged in the wall, and there was a blood splatter on the ceiling of an upstairs bedroom. Other than the children, someone else was missing from the home, though. The family's pit bull, which was reportedly very protective of the children and incredibly loyal. The canine was found running loose on West End and Vanderbilt in Detroit on June 19th. It had strangulation marks around its neck and cigarette burns on its face and chest, all of which were treated after it was taken into care by the Southwest Animal Group. It was placed in a foster home before being identified as Alicia's dog. Law enforcement suspected that Justice had sold it to be bred or to be used in fighting around the time of Alicia's demise. In 2015, Justice agreed to a plea deal with the prosecution in Alicia's case, which saw him plead guilty to second-degree murder and a felony weapons charge. He was subsequently given 45 to 80 years behind bars. Alicia's family believed Justice snapped and killed her when she asked him for a divorce. Jones, meanwhile, was released from prison after serving 6 years for being an accessory after the fact to a felony. Kayla and Christian, meanwhile, have never been seen or heard from in the years since they vanished. Authorities consider them to be in grave danger, and it's unclear what Justice knows about their whereabouts, but the police have speculated that the pair are somewhere in the Atlanta area where he was arrested. Alicia's family believe the children are being hidden by Justice's family or friends because none of their possessions were ever found, suggesting they had been packed up and taken with them. Kayla, Hunter, and Christian Justice are still missing. Kayla was 6 at the time of her disappearance and is described as an African-American girl with brown hair and brown eyes. She may wear her hair in cornrows. At the time of her disappearance, she was 4'5" and 65 pounds. If she is still alive, she will be 15 years old. Christian, meanwhile, was 8 months old when he vanished. He is described as an African-American male with brown hair and brown eyes. He was 2 foot tall and weighed 17 pounds when he went missing. If he is still alive, he will be 9 years old. If you have any information about the whereabouts of Kayla or her brother Christian, you can contact the Detroit Police Department at 313-596-5600. Sean Walsh. Our third case this week comes from an anonymous patron who chose the location of Randwick, Australia. 26-year-old Sean Walsh was last seen at around 3 a.m. on May 10, 2009 in his home in Randwick, Australia. Later that morning, his flatmate, Aidan French, awoke, made breakfast, and waited for Sean to appear. His bedroom door was closed, but as the minutes ticked by, Aidan found it was odd that his flatmate hadn't surfaced. It wasn't until another friend arrived that he decided to check in on Sean, but to his surprise, the 26-year-old was nowhere to be seen. His room looked as it normally did, fairly tidy, with some clothes lying around. His mobile phone was untouched, and there were some books by the bed. Sean has never been seen again. As a young adult, he became a biomedical engineer, but left his hometown of Dungarvan Island in 2007 to see the world. A ski enthusiast, he spent his time away from home working in ski resorts in New Zealand and Japan before backpacking through Southeast Asia. He arrived in Sydney in June of 2008 and met up with his godmother, who was residing in Canberra. By all accounts, he had settled quickly into his new life in Australia, playing Gaelic football, surfing the waves on Saturdays, and sharing drinks with his friends. By December of 2008, he had a job and was planning to make a brief trip home in late May 2009, just before he disappeared. Just days before he went missing, however, on Thursday, May 7th, Sean reportedly turned up at work, acting a little odd. Craig Wellen, the owner of the company Sean worked for, grew concerned when he began taking phone calls from disgruntled clients who had been waiting for the 26-year-old to show up. He recalled asking Sean what was going on. He said he was going to go home to Ireland early, that something very bad had come up. I said to him, "What, like a death in the family?" And he said, "No, it's worse than that." The next day, Sean revealed to Craig that he planned to book his flight home that day. Craig also allowed his employee to take the company van for the weekend, as he often did, and agreed they would speak on Monday and sort out Sean's pay before he returned home. However, on Sunday, he discovered the company van in his driveway. There was no note and no phone calls or messages from the 26-year-old. The van was unlocked, the key in the ignition, and a smattering of Sean's belongings remained, including a surfboard, wetsuit, and some paperwork. Investigators noted that there was no signs of foul play, but couldn't explain what had happened to Sean. He had reportedly booked a flight home for Tuesday, May 12th, but he never boarded it, and his bank accounts have not been accessed since he went missing. One report by the Daily Telegraph states that his passport was missing from his bedroom. Sean's family have described his sudden disappearance as uncharacteristic, and noted that he had no history of mental health issues, didn't gamble, and didn't use drugs. His sister, Brid, added that he was in frequent contact with family members back home and had a close relationship with them. Sean Walsh is still missing. He was last seen in Randwick, Sydney, at around 3 a.m. on May 10, 2009. He is described as a white male with short brown hair and blue eyes. He is around 5'7" and was last seen wearing a khaki-colored jumper and khaki-colored board shorts. If he is still alive, he will be 40 years old. If you have any information about his case, you can contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-111. Anne Valentine. Our penultimate case this month comes from our patron Rose, who chose the city of Edinburgh in Scotland. On January 21st, 1987, 3 men walking along Edinburgh's Union Canal spotted something large floating in the water. The winter had been freezing, and the canal had only just started to thaw. Upon closer inspection, the men realized that what they were looking at was a body. 21-year-old Anne Valentine was the victim, whose remains were pulled up from the canal by investigators. She had been wrapped in an old, filthy carpet and had been just 100 yards from her home in Polwarth. She was identified using dental records due to her body's state of decomposition. Her cause of death was determined to be strangulation via ligature, and she had been sexually assaulted, bound, and dumped into the water naked. Investigators suspected that her body had been stored for some time after her death, believing that she had gone missing just a few days after she was last seen, on November 18th, 1986. Anne was described by her mother, Isabel, as a heavy metal fan and a kind-hearted free spirit. She was unemployed, but spent her time volunteering with disadvantaged young people at Canongate Youth Project, and had recently broken off her engagement, a decision that was reportedly amicable. The last time Isabel saw her daughter was on November 18th, when the two said goodbye and parted ways. She was seen across Edinburgh by various friends over the next few days, but around November 23rd, a friend let her parents know that Anne had failed to turn up for a meeting they'd planned weeks earlier. Then her parents went to her flat and found nobody home. Anne's parents would check in every day looking for their daughter and leaving messages asking her to get in touch. But their pleas went unanswered, and when Anne didn't turn up at her parents' home for Christmas, her family became alarmed and notified the police. An extensive search was launched, but nothing to indicate Anne's whereabouts was ever found. There was no sign of forced entry or a struggle at her home, and nobody in her close circle of friends, including her ex-boyfriend, gave investigators cause for concern. The only notable thing in the investigation was that several items were missing from her flat, including a brass petrol lighter, a sleeveless leather jacket, a photo album, a camera, and a black shoulder bag. Over the years, there's been much speculation about what fate had befallen Anne. Some locals feared that a serial killer was on the loose, given that the 21-year-old's body had been stored for some time before she was dumped into the canal. Anne's parents, meanwhile, believed that they know the identity of the perpetrator, claiming they have a photograph of him with Anne. In 2016, her father, Graham, revealed, "We have a picture of him. He didn't know this picture was being taken. He was sitting with our Anne at a family function. He had this expression on his face. I will never forget it. He looked pure evil." He added, "I don't think he will ever confess. He killed her because if he could not have her, then no one else could." Of course, for legal reasons, and the fact that the couple have no hard evidence against the man, they are unable to publicly name him, but they continue to believe that he is responsible for Anne's murder. Investigators, however, have their own theories, one of which is that John Taylor, dubbed the Beast of Bramley, is responsible for the horrific crime. Taylor was sentenced to life in prison after he took the life of 16-year-old Leanne Tiernan in 2000. He is also responsible for other sex crimes and was charged with those as well. Taylor was a Leeds-based parcel delivery driver who, after killing Leanne, kept her body in a kitchen freezer before dumping her remains 9 months later. In 1986, he would have been 30 years old. He was a regular visitor to Glasgow and would have passed through Edinburgh on his way there. Detectives have stated their belief that Taylor is involved in several other unsolved cases. He has not yet been positively linked to Anne's case, however. If you have any information about Anne's case, you can contact Crime Stoppers at 0800 555 111. The Tran family mystery. Our final case this month comes from Thai Binh in Vietnam, a location chosen by an anonymous patron. In the early 2000s, the unassuming Tran family were living in the rural area of Thai Binh, Vietnam, about an hour away from the city of Ninh Binh. 65-year-old Tran Van Rang was the head of the family and had 8 children, with 2 of his sons living nearby with their own wives and children. The Tran family were known to be hard-working farmers, and by 2002, the 2 married sons had begun construction work nearby as they began to build homes for their families. The mysterious deaths of the Tran family began when 31-year-old Tran Van Ut started building his new house. Within days of the construction work beginning, disaster struck. Van Ut's cattle began dropping like flies, and his pigs, chickens, and ducks started exhibiting bizarre behavior that involved them frothing at the mouths and throwing themselves at walls. It took only hours for his entire herd of cattle to completely die out. The only remaining animal on the property was a lone duck. But it wasn't over. Days later, Van Ut's parents were met with a similar catastrophe when their cattle began to die. Before long, all nearby family members had lost their herds. For the Tran family, things spiraled out of control for here. Van Viet was the family's eldest son. A successful man, he had a steady marriage, a house of his own, and a 5-year-old child. He was described as being in perfect health, but was the first of the family struck down shortly after the construction work began. He suddenly began suffering from pains all over his body that he couldn't explain and was admitted to hospital. However, no doctor could determine what was wrong with Van Viet. There was no explanation as to what was causing his symptoms. The pain he was experiencing became so intense and so frequent that he had to stop doing farm work. It wasn't long before Van Viet took a turn for the worse. He began foaming at the mouth like the animals while he suffered from seizures. Back in the hospital, he slowly began to recover, but staff still couldn't determine what was causing his problems. They found no diseases or poisons in his system. Once again, Van Viet would be dispatched from hospital, seemingly on the mend, but his symptoms began showing themselves once more, and he ultimately passed away in the summer of 2002. Van Viet was just one of many who suffered from these horrific symptoms, as soon after his death, his other family members began to feel the same pains he had described. His father, Van Rang, took his death the worst. He began drinking heavily and found himself in a dark place mentally and emotionally. His health began to deteriorate, and he began suffering the same symptoms as Van Viet had. Van Rang passed away after experiencing seizures. 3 months following Van Rang's death, the entire family set off for the cemetery to carry out the ritual, including Van Ut's 6-year-old son. However, halfway through the ceremony, the little boy collapsed onto the ground, experiencing seizures and foaming at the mouth. He was reportedly dead within minutes. But it wasn't just he who was suffering. As he collapsed, so did several other family members, although it appears that many of these family members fainted, as opposed to experiencing the symptoms the 6-year-old suffered. In the days following the little boy's death, 3 more members of the family were rushed to the hospital, including Van Ut, his wife, and his mother, the latter of whom died in hospital shortly after being admitted. Van Ut recovered in hospital but passed away soon after returning home. His wife left the family and their home afterwards. Reportedly, she kept in good health after her departure. With 5 healthy family members gone, doctors, scientists, and law enforcement were keen to find a simple explanation for these mysterious deaths, and an investigation spanning a month was undertaken. Samples of virtually everything in the area, including earth, air, food, and animal specimens, were collected. Additionally, radiation levels were measured, and numerous neighbors and surviving family members were interviewed. While the investigation was ongoing, Van Rang's mother, Pham Thai Tam, died in hospital. The other patients around her had allegedly been complaining of similar symptoms, including unexplained pains and blackouts. Investigators eventually concluded that the family had suffered from pesticide poisoning, but were never able to find traces of the substance in the environment or in the bodies of the family members. They were unable to name a specific type of poison in their report. To this day, the deaths of the Tran family have not been satisfactorily explained. According to a neighbor of the family, in 2002, he took home of their single remaining duck, but shortly afterwards, his own ducks fell ill and died. The Tran's family duck was the lone survivor once more. Quoc Viet, the family's last surviving son, moved back to the family's abandoned home in 2018, still unclear about what exactly happened to his siblings and parents in 2002. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own theories and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.